This is WEFT Champaign, 90.1 FM, community radio for East Central Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Weekend Heartbeat, a series of shows that represent a collective effort to bring the thoughts and actions of people working in the nonprofit arena to the forefront, where it needs to be. Join us each Saturday at this time to enjoy a different episode in this series. Upcoming shows will include Joy George, the first Saturday of each month, hosting Peace Talks Radio, which talks about the personal conflicts we face every day and ways we may effectively deal with these challenges. Also in this series is Doug Olive, the third Saturday of each month, who will be hosting Speaking of Democracy, which takes a look at political theory and its sociology. Another in this series is Pause Radio on the fourth Saturday of each month, which is an informative program on the care and well-being of our companion animals. Today's show, A New Lamp, features Marilyn Rickey and Sean David, who will be bringing an informative light to the Baha'i faith and its philosophy. The views and opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent those of WEFT, its board of directors, associates, station manager, or Prairie Air Incorporated. The following program is pre-recorded and consists of two parts. The first part is a rebroadcast of a program first aired in 2011. The second part was recorded on February 7th, 2015. Welcome to Weekend Heartbeat. I'm Sean David, and this is A New Lamp.
New lamp for old. New lamp for old. Remember how Aladdin headed out to get oil for his mother's old dented, tarnished lamp? And in the market he met a magician calling out these words. This strange man was offering to give him a brand new shiny lamp for his old one. That's what I want to offer you, if you'll have it. A new lamp of spiritual guidance. But maybe you already have such a lamp, which still burns brightly. Great. You are still welcome to join us simply to learn who we are. But maybe your lamp of divine guidance has gotten dented and tarnished like Aladdin's. Or perhaps you have no such lamp at all. To you, I offer a new lamp. Hi, my name is Marilyn. Welcome to A New Lamp, a program designed to make you acquainted with the Baha'i religious faith. I hope you will choose to spend the next few minutes with me. Thanks.
Is there any remover of difficulties save God? Say praise be God. He's God. All of his servants and all abide by his
Today, we continue our story about the Bab, the forerunner of Baha'u'llah. The Bab wrote many things, drastically new ideas for that day. His main book is the Persian Bayan, B-A-Y-O-N, in which he establishes new laws. Both secular and religious leaders were doing everything in their power to kill this new movement. The Bab was imprisoned in the mountains of Persia and eventually taken to Tabriz, where he was executed. Now, I'm going to tell you a true story, and if you choose to question my honesty, I would understand. I refer you to the newspaper archives of that era in Europe and see the story in print, as witnessed by reporters who were there that day. The execution was to take place in the army barracks where he and a companion, Anis, were being held. The commander of the Armenian regiment did not want to do it. He believed the Bab to be a good man and went to see him. He said he was a Christian and felt strongly that this execution was wrong. The Bab told the commander to stay with his assignment. If he were sincere, God would relieve him of it. When the guard came to get the Bab and his disciple who was to die with him, the Bab asked the guard to wait briefly while he finished some business. His request was denied. The Bab and Anis with him were suspended on a wall. Thousands of onlookers were there as a full regiment of 750 guns prepared to fire, 250 at a time. The order was given. The guns fired. When the smoke cleared, the Bab was not there, and his companion was standing there alive. The ropes had been severed by the bullets. The Bab was found finishing up his business and then returned to once again face the firing squad. The Armenian commander refused to do this again. Another regiment was brought in, and the execution accomplished. Although the two men's bodies were shattered into one mass of flesh, their faces were untouched. The bodies were thrown into a moat, and a guard set over them. However, a brave disciple was able to remove the bodies and hide them. Over many years, they were moved from place to place in hiding under the direction of Baha'u'llah and are now entombed in the shrine of the Bab on the side of Mount Carmel in Haifa, Israel, the world center of the faith.
They pulled the bodies down from the post, laid them out on the stones, dragged their remains through crowded streets to dump at the edge of a moat. Armed soldiers were placed, guard at the site, to stop anyone coming near. That the indignity could be seen far and wide, the outcome was certain and clear. The outcome was certain and clear. But rivers of light were guiding their path, guiding their course, were there at their side. That most sacred trust was washed in the night. by rivers of light, by rivers of light. Suleiman Khan, he came to Tabriz. One thing he had in mind, to rescue the Bab wherever he was, even if he had to die. He told the Mir had a friend who was born with a cast iron will. He stole the bodies for Suleiman Khan, who wrapped them in covers of silk, who wrapped them in covers of silk. Rivers of light, wending their way, the long winding road down to the sea. A faraway bay was ever in sight of rivers of light, of rivers of light. Baha'u'llah charted each step of their path, each move the casket would take. Kept in one place at least 18 years until he thought it unsafe. The summons they came, move it again. Friends took it out in the night. When they opened the lid to check the shroud, they found a dried flower inside. They found a dried flower inside. Suleiman Khan, did you place that flower so tenderly in that dark hour before you went out, out like a fire on rivers of light, on rivers of light. 30 more years that trust changed hands from mosques to the homes of the friends, till the call came, send it with care to its final destination. Via Baghdad, Damascus, Beirut, that precious trust traveled on, reaching Akkar on the 31st day of the year 1899, of the year 1899. Abdul Baha was the one who took charge, and after 10 years replaced the Bab. Tears fell like rain, silver and fine, like rivers of light, like rivers of light, rivers of light, guiding their path, guiding their course, were there at their side. If you go to Carmel, by day or by night, you'll find the shrine bathed in rivers of light.
Had you believed in me, O wayward generation, every one of you would have followed the example of this youth, who stood in rank above most of you, and willingly would have sacrificed himself in my path. The day will come when you will have recognized me. That day I shall have ceased to be with you. The Bab. Thanks so much for being with me this morning. I hope you have found a blessing during these few minutes. If you want to learn more about the Baha'i religion, you can go online to www.bahai.us. To contact me, my email address is anewlamp@yahoo.com. Thanks, and have a great day. Welcome to our February program of A New Lamp, and happy Valentine's Day. Our guest today is Matt Gianni, who has recently moved into our area from Texas, and we are so glad to have him with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now let's see. We'd like to find out a little bit about our guests before we go on to today's topic. Now let's see. I see that you are a research assistant professor in the Department of Education Policy, Organization, and Leadership at the U of I.
Correct. Yes.
And so that's interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm actually a recent transplant to Illinois. So before we moved up in September, my wife and I were living in Texas, from Texas originally, and I was working on my PhD in education policy at the University of Texas at Austin. And just got this position, moved up, started in October, so been here for a few months. But yeah, I was very blessed to be raised in a Baha'i family. Both my father and mother became Baha'i when they were young. Neither of them was raised in the faith, but they both became Baha'is shortly before they got married. And then I was raised in the Baha'i faith as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, you have come to Champaign-Urbana, which is... It's not a dinky little town, but neither is it anywhere near as big as what you came from.
That's true.
And we have a small Baha'i community here, and I understand you folks were in a pretty large-sized Baha'i community.
Yes. Basically all of the communities, most of the communities I've lived in have been pretty large. So I'm from Houston originally, and Houston has quite a large Baha'i community. And my wife is from Dallas, which also has a very large community. And for some reason, many Iranians, I'm sure we'll talk about this as we get into the program, but many Iranians, given the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran, fled from Iran and came to different places in the United States. And both of those communities had very large populations of people that had fled the persecution and settled in the United States. So both of those communities were very large. Austin was also a very large community, so it's been somewhat of a transition, but everyone's been so nice. We've got that Midwestern hospitality so far. And, it's just been a great transition, so no complaints.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I tell you, we're really glad to have you folks have joined us here.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's see. We want to think about what we have going on this month, and we have a biggie coming up that we really want to discuss and give emphasis to. On February 27th, we are going to be holding in conjunction, I believe, with the student organization of Baha'is at the U of I. And so this will be, we're not sure just exactly where it's going to be taking place or the time, but we will hopefully get this on to our program before that day arrives. Is that right, Sean?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and cut in when we have the information, and I'll just add it in, probably right now. That's 6 p.m. in room 100 of Gregory Hall at 810 South Wright Street in Urbana.
Okay, that's great. So we want to think about the situation on education of the Baha'i youth in Iran. A few years ago, I actually had a newspaper item in the News Gazette about the situation when we were asked to kind of let it be known to our local communities what's going on. And since that time, it's still a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was really happy that the devotional program that preceded this interview was, talking about the Bab, who was the forerunner of Baha'u'llah. And the Bab really epitomizes a lot of the persecution that the early Baha'is have faced, really since the founding of the Baha'i faith, And some estimates are that about approximately 20,000 people, 20,000 Baha'is, have been executed from the time the Baha'i faith was founded in Iran alone by the Iranian government.
Right.
And Baha'u'llah really talks about that this is a central theme of every faith. Every time a new messenger of God comes and has a new message, that message often challenges the orthodoxy, right? It challenges the prevailing norms, it challenges the power structure, and that often leads in a lot of pushback, a lot of persecution, a lot of harassment, and other things. And that's definitely been the case with the Baha'i faith as well. Very serious persecution and executions and things for the entire history of the faith in Iran. And then that changed a little bit before the Iranian Revolution. There was a time when the Baha'i community started getting recognized more for its efforts for promoting peace, for promoting education, promoting unity. And there was it wasn't a perfectly easy relationship between the government and the Baha'is, but there at least wasn't as much outright persecution.
Right.
And then, of course, the revolution happened in 1979. And since that time, things have gotten far worse for the Baha'is. And one of the facets of that discrimination has been the denial of Baha'is to access to higher education. So that's part of what the campaign is currently focusing on. The Education is Not a Crime campaign. That education has been considered a crime for Baha'is in Iran. And that seems very ironic because, generally people pursuing education, developing their skills, developing their knowledge, developing their talents and finding ways to contribute to their society is something that's so valued in almost every civilization on the planet.
Right.
But yet, for the Baha'is in Iran, that's a crime, that you are literally persecuted, thrown in jail simply for trying to pursue higher education. Yeah. So that's what we're really trying to bring attention to and focus on with this current event that'll be held on campus February 27th.
And this is to include a film?
It is, yes. So there was a film by a documentary filmmaker named Maziar Bahari.
Right.
The film is called To Light a Candle. And Bahari's very well-respected, well-known journalist, filmmaker, human rights activist.
Daily Show guest.
Daily Show guest, absolutely. Yeah, he's probably most well-known for a book called And Then They Came For Me, I believe is the name of the memoir. So he was educated in Canada, where he went to school to be a filmmaker and journalist. And then after that, he worked for Newsweek and BBC and many other organizations. So in 2009, around the time of the Iranian election, he traveled to Iran to just interview people, do his film work, documentary work at that time. And he got captured by the Iranian government for being a dissident, a revolutionary, for various reasons. And he ends up getting thrown in jail. He's in jail for 4 months. He's tortured. He's beaten. He loses 25 pounds during the time just because they were, denying him food. And it just sounded like a really awful endeavor. And every day he said his guard would come to him and say, everyone's forgotten you, right? Your execution's tomorrow. Did you know that? We forgot to tell you that it's tomorrow, right? So tonight's your last night. So just make peace with yourself.
Right.
And,
now, this man is not a Baha'i, is that
no,
true?
And he's not a Baha'i, but he, from his experience, just firsthand of the Iranian government's persecution of people that challenge the power structure there, he became familiar with the Baha'is because the Baha'is have a very similar story. They're trying to promote positive ideals, unity, all these things, but they've been met with so much persecution from the government. So he made this film, To Light a Candle, which is really about both the persecution the Baha'is have faced, but more importantly, their kind of constructive resilience in the face of this persecution, and in particular, how they've created voluntary forms of higher education for themselves, and an organization called the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education, which is the Baha'i community's kind of voluntary network of educators and administrators that's used to kind of provide education to those Baha'i students that have been denied access to higher education by the government.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I know a couple of professors in Illinois who have been part of that. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah,
that they were teaching the Iranian Baha'is from their homes.
Yeah, and that's one of the really fascinating things about the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education is that it started in, I believe, 1985 or 1987, if I remember correctly. And at that time, no internet, no Skype, no email, no anything, you know?
Right.
So this education, this university education was occurring by professors in isolation, developing curricula, developing coursework, developing assignments, then getting it to couriers who would then kind of secretly go through the community and find the students that have enrolled in the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education, hand them the assignments. The students in isolation would do the assignments by themselves, give the assignments back to the courier, and then that would go back to the teachers because they couldn't congregate in the same place because that would raise the suspicions of the government. That would result in them cracking down on Baha'is trying to assemble. So it started off in this way, and it's just like you just don't think of that being a university education. But now with the advances in technology, we see people are volunteering to be instructors all over the world, So we have many people in the United States that are now teachers for the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education. And it's really amazing that the technological advancements have allowed the community to really thrive in this effort to really overcome a lot of the persecution they've faced.
And I understand, too, that once they have graduated from the Baha'i Institute of Higher Education, that in many places they can transfer this to a regular university and receive their credits for it.
Yeah.
And so it's not just a little fly-by-night thing. And yet it's just a few years ago that I believe the teachers there in Iran were gathered up, arrested, and are still in prison.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, it's just always amazing to me. One of the more recent persecutions that upset me quite a bit was just a few months ago in Shiraz when the cemetery was totally devastated by the Revolutionary Guard who had bought the area. They just tossed the caskets out, and they're going to build a sports complex
Wow.
on this.
So
And that I just found that that place holds many of the martyrs that would have been killed in '79. The teachers who were killed at that time.
And it's another interesting parallel between what's going on right now and the devotional program you provided this morning, talking about the Bab, who was executed, and his remains could not be disclosed. The location of his remains could not be disclosed because the government would have come and taken them away.
Right.
So the remains of the Bab were transported from location to location for something like 30 years, I believe, or somewhere in that time frame, simply because that's just another facet of the persecution that will even destroy the dead, right? Even after they're already dead, we'll try to destroy their remains, destroy their burial sites, simply to try to break the will and break the heart of the Baha'i community.
Right.
And in Bahari's film, To Light a Candle, there's some amateur footage of an Iranian Baha'i who's taking video footage of a Baha'i grave in Iran, a Baha'i grave site that has recently been desecrated by the local community. And the unfortunate thing in these situations is that it's not the government itself that's always doing it, but a lot of times it's the local clergy that's arousing up the passions of the individuals there, and that are saying, oh, these Baha'is, they're doing all these terrible things, we should go do this to them. So it's the community themselves that go up and end up doing all these awful things. So yeah, it's very unfortunate, but hopefully we can bring more attention to the situation, put more pressure on the community so these things don't continue to happen.
Hey, Matt, I got a question.
Sure.
I was wondering where this all kind of came from. Of all of the ways to persecute a religious minority, it seems that denying them education is not the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Is there a history behind that, where that came from?
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting history. So, as I mentioned previously, the period leading up to the Islamic Revolution, there was actually a decent amount of tolerance for the Baha'i community. They weren't being outright persecuted by the current regime. And one of the things that the Baha'i community really emphasized was education. And one of the Baha'i principles is universal education, the establishment of education for all people, regardless of background or income or anything else. So Baha'is did that in Iran, just like they do in every community where there's a sufficient number of Baha'is to establish education. So the Baha'i schools were extremely popular in Iran in the 40s, 50s, 60s, leading up to the revolution. And not just by Baha'is, but by all folks. All people in Iran would really flock to these schools, largely because we had a lot of progressive principles that were really infused into the curriculum. So emphasizing the oneness of humanity, the equality of men and women, all of these ideals that were very progressive. So although the schools were very popular, as we got leading up to the kind of regime change, there was increasing skepticism about this form of Baha'i education because these ideals weren't just viewed as progressive, they were viewed as Western, right? So a focus on material development and developing your skills in order to kind of promote material development, that seemed very Western. The equality of men and women, that was a very Western ideal. Oneness of humanity, that was very Western. Oneness of religion. So all of these principles that were central to the faith came to be associated by the Iranian government with Westernism. So when the Iranian Revolution happened, there was a big condemnation and criticism of all things Western, and the Baha'is were kind of swept up in that. So, as I also mentioned, the initial phase of the Iranian regime's persecution of the Baha'is was imprisonment, execution, capturing, all these types of things. But one of the themes of the Baha'i faith that Shoghi Effendi, the Guardian, talks about is this dynamism of crisis and victory, right? That there's all these crises that occur in the faith, but they're often followed by victories. Yes. So, there was all of this outright persecution, these killings, these imprisonments. But one of the things that started happening is that it made more people hear about the faith and more people come in contact with it. And often it increased the popularity of the faith. So eventually, because of that kind of reaction, as well as some international pressure against the Iranian regime, they moved away from this outright persecution and execution and things like that. But at the same time, they thought to themselves, well, how do we keep down a people? How do we suppress their progress if we can't just murder them all, essentially?
Right.
Well, one of the ways to do that is to deny them access to education, to prevent them from developing their skills, to prevent them from getting into these positions of power, whether it's owning businesses or being lawyers or working in the government, all of which are illegal to Baha'is now. So not only are they denied access to higher education, but they can't work for the government. A lot of times if they own a business, their business will be seized by the local government and it is no longer theirs. So there's all of these forms of kind of suppression of their progress. And there was actually this very haunting memo that was written by the Iranian government, by one agency of the Iranian government, that talks about the way that the government needs to go about persecuting the Baha'is and specifically blocking their cultural progress and prosperity. And this is one of the letters that's highlighted in To Light a Candle in Bahari's documentary.
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, it's so basically this memo is written by this group responsible for the kind of cultural integrity of the Iranian community. And they basically say, we can't keep killing them. We can't keep just outright executing them. It's not working, but we have to deny their progress and prosperity somehow. So let's do that by denying them access to higher education. So this is an official memo from the Iranian government, and this was communicated to all deans and presidents of the universities throughout the country. So now if a Baha'i applies to the University of Tehran or any other university, as soon as it's discovered that they're Baha'i, they're immediately kicked out.
Wow.
So that's kind of the history of why denying higher education in particular has become kind of the staple of the suppression of the Iranian regime against the Baha'i community.
Now, they do get elementary education, is that right?
They do, and I'm not an expert on that necessarily, but so I should say one facet of this persecution is the denial of education. The other facet is the promotion of miseducation about the Baha'is. So there's a whole lot of propaganda against the Baha'is that's propagated, by the Iranian government, particularly through the education system. So a lot of Iranian non-Baha'is would say, oh, I learned about the Baha'i faith when I was growing up, but I hear they're all heretics. They promote prostitution and, deception and lying and all these terrible things, because that's the kind of official understanding, if you will, of the Baha'i community that's kind of promoted through education. So you have that going on. Baha'is are still allowed to go through kind of elementary education and up to a certain point, but once they get to higher education, they're denied access. One of the interesting stories that's highlighted in this documentary is this young Baha'i who was, raised in Iran, applied to university, got accepted, and it eventually became known that she was Baha'i and she was kicked out of the university. And she heard about the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education, and she eventually became a BIHE student. And, she talked about how difficult studying at BIHE was because of all this correspondence going back and forth with the professor, and you don't have classrooms and da-da-da. She said one of the difficulties is that she didn't have access to books and curriculum. She just couldn't find them. And once again, this isn't Baha'i material. This isn't our holy scriptures. This is a chemistry book. This is a physics textbook. So what she would do is she would get the identification cards of her friends who were enrolled in the university in order to get access to the library. So she would fake her identification using her friend's ID in order to get access to the library. And I'm like, if that's not the most noble use of a fake ID I've ever heard, I mean, if that's what everyone used fake IDs for, to get access to a library that they were denied access to, we would be living in an amazing society, That's usually not how people use fake IDs. But I remember hearing that story, and that just shows the dedication and the thirst of the Baha'i community for education there, that they're willing to go to such lengths. To do something that we all just take advantage of. We all in Urbana-Champaign have public libraries that we can just go into, and we have all the books we want.
Right, it's taken for granted.
Taken for granted, But that was one of the stories from the documentary that really stuck with me, is using a fake ID to go to the library, and we're very fortunate, very fortunate.
Well, it's my understanding, if a Baha'i were to go to a university to register, you have to put down what religion you are. And there's no place that says other.
Nope.
So if a Baha'i were to check that they were Muslim in order to be able to attend, well, they maybe get through school, but once they got out of school, became known that they really were a Baha'i, that would be a death sentence.
Yeah. And it, just goes against the Baha'i principle that you can't recant your faith for expediency, for, personal benefit. It's interesting, the story of Roxana Saberi, the journalist who was also imprisoned in Iran, and she was placed into the same prison, Evin Prison, which is known as the worst prison in Iran. That's the prison where the Baha'i leaders are currently imprisoned and have been for the past 7 years. So generally when journalists or dissidents or Baha'is or anyone else is imprisoned by the Iranian government, normally they want a confession and they want them to recant whatever they've done, And for Baha'is, that's recanting your faith. So as long as you recant your faith and say, I accept Muhammad, I am Muslim, they let you go scot-free. But, no Baha'is do that. They say, I'm Baha'i, I'm not willing to say I'm anything else, I'm sorry, So when Roxana Saberi was captured and imprisoned, they asked her to say that they asked her to confess certain things, that she was working for the Western media and she was working as a spy or whatever, all these crazy charges that they placed against her. And she wanted to get out of jail. So she said, okay, fine, I'll say whatever you want me to say, So she does that, she gives her confession. They say, okay, we'll let you out tomorrow. She goes back to her jail. And she meets one of the Baha'is, one of the Baha'i leaders who's imprisoned. And she starts talking to her, and she's like, oh, yeah, I just had to confess these things, and they're letting me go. Why haven't you confessed, or why haven't you recanted your faith? You'd get out. And I think it was Mahfash Sabet, who's one of the Yaran, one of the leaders of the Baha'is, who said, I can't do that. How could I say I'm not a Baha'i when I'm a Baha'i? I mean,
Right.
I know I've been in prison for 5 years, but I can't just say I'm not a Baha'i, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it was that triggered in Roxana Saberi's heart, I've made a mistake. I can't go against my principles just for my personal benefit. I can't do these things and make this false confession and basically lie just to get out of jail because that's, you know, what I want. So anyway, yeah, that was an interesting story.
Yeah.
So let's hear a little bit more about the event that's going to be being taken place on the 27th. We know that we're going to be seeing the film To Light a Candle. And what else will be taking place that day?
Yeah, so after viewing the film, we're going to have a panel discussion, and that will be moderated by Kamal Grantham, who's a good friend of the Baha'i community. He's not a Baha'i himself, but he's very graciously offered to come out and help. Kamal's got his PhD in clinical psychology from St. John's University, and he's a clinical counselor at the University of Illinois. And I know he's very interested in things like multicultural counseling and cultural identity development. So when we spoke to him about this initiative, he thought, you know, it would be a great way for him to serve. And, you know, he's very passionate about trying to ensure that, you know, everyone has the education that we're so gracious to have here in the United States. So, yeah, we're very excited to have him as well.
Oh, great.
That is wonderful. So if people want to join in this endeavor, what could they do?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Marilyn. There's many things that they can do. So the first thing is that there's a lot more information to learn. Of course, we're going to watch this documentary, which kind of details, you know, the issues that the Baha'is are facing. But there's a lot more information to go out there and learn about. So there's a couple of resources for that. So one, this specific campaign has its own website, which is educationisnotacrime.me. That's .me at the end. So that talks not only about the purpose of the current campaign, but also all the different people that have come out and support it and have mentioned their support for it.
Right.
So, for example, there's statements by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who recently came out and was supporting this, and Rainn Wilson lent his support, and many other, you know, people that are, you know, catching wind of this are really getting behind it, which is great. There's also a Facebook page. Just if you search "Education is Not a Crime," you'll get to the Facebook page. And hopefully in the near future, we're also going to have an event page on Facebook for our specific event. So if you search "Education is Not a Crime" and then University of Illinois in Facebook, that should take you to the event page, and that'll talk more about who's going to be on the panel, what's the purpose of the evening, time, date, all of those types of things.
Right.
As I mentioned before, we're going to have this Twitter hashtag "Education is Not a Crime."
Yes.
So particularly around the time of the event, if you have a Twitter handle, you want to get on Twitter, join the conversation. You know, and I really want to stress that because one of the things that we've seen in regards to the history of the Baha'is in Iran is that although there's a lot of persecution still being faced by that community, it has gotten a little bit better, right? So people were being outright executed day in, day out for quite a period of time, particularly after the Iranian Revolution. You know, there were a lot of very high-ranking Baha'is killed very quickly. In fact, you know, the Baha'i community is democratically governed. We don't have any clergies or individuals who, you know, have the authority to interpret the word of God for anyone else. But we do have elected bodies. So in every community where there's at least 9 Baha'is, we have a locally elected body. For every country, we have a nationally elected body, and then we also have an international body that kind of governs the affairs of the international community. So after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the National Assembly in Iran was captured and never heard from again, right? And it's almost the equivalent of, you know, in a political sense, like something like the Supreme Court. Just, I mean, those are the people that they're the, I don't want to say highest ranking, but some of the most well-respected, knowledgeable people in the Baha'i community in Iran.
Yes.
All of them were captured and just executed overnight, you know? And that actually happened a second time. So another assembly was elected shortly thereafter. All of them were captured, just executed, you know?
Right.
And this has happened a couple times. So eventually the Baha'i community in Iran said, well, maybe we shouldn't have an assembly anymore, right? Maybe we'll just have a more informal group of people that will kind of govern the affairs of the community, but we won't have an elected national assembly like we did before. Well, we established another one of those bodies in Iran, and they were all captured, and they're now in prison. But because of so much of the pressure that the Baha'i community and the international community has put on the Iranian government, they were not executed like, the previous assemblies were.
Right.
So although there's still a lot of persecution taking place, what we're seeing is that things can get better if we raise our voices, if we draw attention to the cause, if we put pressure on the Iranian government and view this not as the issues of a religious minority in this country, but as a human rights issue, right? Which we definitely believe it is. So simply by joining the conversation, by talking about it with your friends, we really think we can increasingly put more pressure on the government to try to, treat the Baha'is a little bit better.
Yeah,
right.
And the other minorities there too.
And so many groups. I mean, that's one of the, bad and good things is that the Baha'is aren't the only group being persecuted. And when we see the persecution happening to journalists or other religious minorities or other dissidents, more and more people are starting to put pressure on the Iranian government to change. So, it's obviously terrible and unfortunate that so many different groups are facing this type of persecution. But if there's any silver lining, it is the fact that more people are drawing attention to it, and there's at least some inklings that the Iranian government is starting to treat its citizens a little more equitably, or at least has the potential to do so in the near future. So,
Well, I think, too, it's, though the Baha'is are a minority, they are the largest minority in Iran, and I believe that there's like some 300,000. And so that's not just a little group of people. That's a pretty good sized group of people.
it is.
And at the time that the leadership, I don't know how many years ago was that now that they were imprisoned, 7 I think it has been, that people living in America, in the United States, from Iran were just so upset about what was happening in their country that even though they were not Baha'is themselves, they had sent out a paper. I think there were some 200 people in the United States from Iran voiced their discontent about what was happening. And so it is the Iranian people, except for those who are kind of egged on, like you say, by the clergy, seem to have an understanding that the Baha'is are not what the government is trying to say that they are. They are not ignorant people. They see for themselves.
Yeah.
So, Matt, we want to thank you so much for coming today and tell us about this event coming up, as well as what's been going on with the Baha'i faith in Iran. That's been very good to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming out, and I hope to see everyone at the event on February 27th.
Well, I certainly hope we have a good crowd once we know where it's at.
Exactly. I'll add that in again at this point.
Okay.
At 6 p.m., Gregory Hall, Room 100, 810 South Wright Street, Urbana.
Other events that will be going on at the Baha'i Center in Urbana over these next few weeks are on Tuesday evenings at 7 o'clock, there is a prayer and meditation time led by Joan Mills. Each Sunday morning at 10:30, there are devotions. On the 22nd of February, the devotions will be followed by a potluck and an afternoon of games and fun for all. On the following Sunday, March 1st, there will be a special chili dinner at noon, followed by a Yamaha program. What is a Yamaha?
Yamaha means intercalary days. Basically, because the Baha'i calendar is a lunar calendar, in order to reconcile it with the Gregorian calendar so that it stays the same year after year, there's a period of days at the end of the Baha'i calendar that aren't a part of the Gregorian calendar to match it up. It's like leap year. So the Yamiha days are days for Baha'is of festivities and gift giving,
And charity, good
And
works.
charity.
All right. So, do either of you have any special memories of a Yamiha in your past?
Well, actually, yeah. Probably my big memory of Yamiha when I was a child was I made a paper mache pinata, a dragon. And I was really big on all kinds of projects like that at that point in my life. I was probably about 12.
Oh, that's a good point for doing that. Kind
Yeah,
of
it was a lot of fun. But the reason why that particular memory stands out is because my dragon was invincible and slayed the slayers. No one could break it.
What did you
No
make
one
it
could
out
get
of, Sean?
just I don't know, but it was a very well constructed dragon. They managed to break the wings, but the part of it that had the candy in it they could not break.
Who
And
were the slayers?
well, all of the other children. All the
Ah.
children, and then eventually the adults came in with the stick to try to whack it. No one could break it. Eventually, we had to take it off of the ceiling and just stomp on it. That was it. So, in a way, it's a failure, right? Epic fail on my piñata. But on the other hand, it was like, I win.
So basically, a Yamiha was defeating foes and stomping on a dragon.
There you
Okay,
go. That's
perfect.
what it was.
That's not for all Baha'is, but yeah, for Sean kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I
that worked.
don't think that's written in any of our books.
No.
Oh dear. Well, that's fun, and in a few minutes, maybe you can play the Yamaha polka for us. I think that's a fun one. That's Barb Pauls and friends, some children that join her, and it's a cute little thing, just really appropriate for that. On Sunday, March 8th, there will be a fireside meeting at 1 o'clock, and this will be featuring David Crenshaw from Eureka on prayer and fasting.
One last time, it is the Education is Not a Crime program. It will be at 6 p.m. in room 100 of Gregory Hall. That's 810 South Bright Street in Urbana.
So, let's see here. When we will be going on to devotional readings in a few minutes, and Matt, I hope you will join us in that.
Absolutely.
Here we are together, rejoicing once again. The time is right for singing about the Yamiha.
Isn't that a piano? No, it's not a piano.
Then why is it called a Yamaha?
It's not a Yamaha. It's the Yamiha. It's the time of joy, a Yamiha.
These are days of giving, of charity and love. We're full of joy, we're singing about a Yamiha.
Isn't that a cool guitar? No, it's not a cool guitar.
And why is it called a Yamaha?
It's not a Yamaha. It's the Yamiha. It's the time of joy, a Yamiha. Isn't that a motorbike? No, it's not a motorbike. Why is it called a Yamaha? It's not a Yamaha. It's a Yamiha. It's the time of joy, a Yamiha.
Another year is winding down, the fast will soon begin. But while there's time, we're singing about a Yamiha.
Isn't that a stereo? No, it's not a stereo. Why is it called a Yamaha? It's not a Yamaha. It's a Yamiha. It's the time of joy, 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 a Yamiha.
Grant, O my God, that I may not be reckoned among those whose ears are deaf, whose eyes are blind, whose tongues are speechless, and whose hearts have failed to comprehend.
It is for the will, and through the manifestation of his own self, that God hath fashioned, out of his own self, 18 souls ere the creation of all things, and he hath enshrined the sign of their recognition in the inmost reality of all things, that all, from the depths of their essence, may bear witness that he is the primal unity, and the eternal, and the ever-abiding.
Know thou that he is the supreme mirror of God, out of whose revelation is manifested the worldly mirror, which is naught but the letters of the living, and naught is seen in that supreme mirror of God but God.
He is the first, yet not defined as such, and he is the last, but not described as such. He is the seen and not praised as such, and he is hidden and not recognized as such.
Just as the root principles of religion and its faith people have progressed beyond the physical realm, the divine signs have also infinitely advanced beyond the limited physical realm. Thus, it is supremely necessary that the testimony of that servant should belong to the realm that surpasseth the world of intellect, which is naught but the stations of true recognition and transcendent unity.
From all eternity I have indeed recognized thee, and unto all eternity will ever do so through thine own self, and not through anyone else besides thee. Verily thou art the source of all knowledge, the omniscient. From everlasting I have besought, unto everlasting I will beseech forgiveness for my limited understanding of thee, aware as I am that there is no God but thee, the all-glorious, the Almighty. Glorified is he besides whom there is none other God. In his grasp he holdeth the source of authority, and verily God is powerful over all things. We have decreed that every long life shall in truth suffer decline, and that every hardship shall be followed by ease, that perchance men may recognize the gate of God as he who is the eternal truth. And verily God shall stand as witness unto those that have believed.
Know thou that the essence of religion is the knowledge of God. The perfection of this knowledge is belief in his unity. The perfection of this belief is the negation of all names and attributes before his sanctified essence. And the perfection of this negation is to immerse oneself with certain knowledge in the ocean of oneness, and to witness one's attainment to its bounty.
The music on today's program are Is There Any Remover of Difficulties by Mansoor Sobhani, River of Light, Blessed is the Spot, and Whither Can a Lover Go, sung by Grant Hinden Miller, and the Yamaha Polka by Barb Qualls. If you would like to learn more about the Baha'i community in Champaign-Urbana, or any of the activities we've mentioned today, you can visit our website at www.cu-bahai.org. If you would like to learn more about the Baha'i Faith, please visit www.bahai.us. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope you'll join us again next month. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this week's Weekend Heartbeat on WEFT Champaign 90.1 FM, Community Radio, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org.